All right, so we're live now. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Wednesday Reviews, even though this is being filmed on a Tuesday evening. And I have a very special guest with me. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. I go by Notes Reviews. I've been on this channel. Well, this is my first time on this channel, but I've had my channel for I think like 6 years or something. So talking about progressive rock and prog and all good music, and that's
Yeah,
me.
that's great. It's great. I
Yeah.
did watch your channel actually before I started
Oh,
making my channel.
oh
So
wow, thank you.
no problem. So today we're going to be talking about a very well-known album amongst the progressive rock community, which is The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway by Genesis. And this is early Genesis, I believe, the final album with Peter Gabriel on vocals,
R.I.P.
which
Yeah.
was released in 1974. So, I have quite a few copies. Well, no, I've got two copies. I've got one on vinyl and I have a CD as well. So I've got
Yeah, I know. I've got my original CD and then the CD that I got in the box set that covers the early stuff.
Yeah, that's
Um,
the CD I think that I've got as well. Yeah.
yeah, it's got a great it's weird how they chop some of the songs up
Yeah,
in that
definitely.
one. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I love the DVD like surround sound that it comes with.
Yeah, I love
um
those Genesis surround sound
oh,
mixes.
they're
They
so
sound
well
so
done.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I also have the archive that has the entirety live, where I think Peter Gabriel comes back and re-records some of the vocals.
Oh, right. Nice. That's cool.
Yeah, I might have to like showcase it on my channel one of these days, because it was one of my first like real box sets that I got for Christmas when I was like 16 or something.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's
And then
cool.
the vinyls. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was like one of the first Genesis albums that we got in our collection. I think we got Nursery
Nice.
Crime first, and then we got
Hmm.
Foxtrot, and then Lamb Lies Down.
Yeah, this was one of the first albums for me in the Genesis discography that I got and got really into. So
Yeah, this one actually took me quite a while to get into initially, just because of its length, just the
yeah.
length of the actual album itself. Just
Yeah.
it kind of freaked me out at first because I wasn't used to really long albums. I mean, I can compare it to like the Structure of the Wall as well, with like all the different
Hmm.
interludes and stuff like that, which is another album that took me a while to get into.
Yeah,
But
and
like,
I found I immediately connected to the first side of the album and then couldn't understand the second side, or like the second
yeah,
disc. And then I came to appreciate and love the second disc even more. So
mm.
it was really interesting to kind of track my journey with that album.
Yeah. I mean, for me, with The Lamb Lies Down, I think that the first half is my favorite. I remember
Hmm.
I was at I think someone's house and someone was playing on the radio, and it just came on the radio randomly, and I didn't think that
Hmm.
radio stations in the UK still played Genesis.
Yeah, same. Like the title track of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway and the Carpet Crawlers, I can still hear on the radio every once in a while, like only
Mm,
on like the psychedelic Sundays.
yeah,
But yeah.
it's always on like some like weird obscure radio stations
Yeah.
that like only a couple of people listen to or tune into. But that's
Hmm.
part.
It is, yeah.
So I've written down, as I've said,
Yeah.
in all my videos, I break down every single track because um, it's I like being able to pick out all the different parts of the songs and things like
Hmm.
that, and then add it all up to like the end of the album. And as everyone's probably aware, this is actually a concept album,
Hmm.
and it would make sense due to the length of the album and the structure of the album and the lyrics and all that kind of jazz.
Yeah.
I really do like the concept as well. I
Yeah.
like
And
reading the CD inner sleeve and the not the inner sleeve, the gatefold. Sorry,
yeah.
what is so cool.
Yeah, and even to this day, like I've had this record for almost 20 years, like I still don't quite understand the full concept. Like I know it's a very narrative concept of like, then
Mm.
this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. But like I'm still trying to grapple like what's the point?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've got like the basic gist of it just
Hmm.
by listening to the lyrics, but I had to like do a little bit of external googling to
Yeah.
figure it out because I did put it in my best concept albums list because I thought it was a
Hmm.
good concept of it.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah.
All right, so I guess we could just start with the title track of the album, which opens up the album. I actually
Yeah.
know this track quite well because it was one that I always played on repeat.
Hmm.
I really like the intro and the whole crashes into the whole song. It's just so great, and the harmonies, the drums, everything just sounds so good in this track.
Yeah, yeah, and I love how Tony on the keyboards really is the driving force. Like he's the driving force for a lot of these tracks in terms of like the
Yeah,
music.
definitely.
But I love how not only does he open up this album, but like continue to provide that heartbeat for it. And similarly with the drums, like Phil on the drums, I'm still boggled by how he's able to keep track of all these different things.
Yeah, I found that this was a very keyboard driven album, that
Mm-hmm.
it kind of took the lead a lot of the time. I think some of the tracks, it was just like vocals, keys and drums.
Yeah.
I didn't really hear much bass and guitar, but
Yeah, like I
yeah,
love the bass at certain tracks, and I know we'll get into those when they appear. But
yeah.
yeah, they're much more subdued. They're kind of brought to the back more often than not.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame though, because they're two great musicians, both Steve
Hmm.
Hackett and Mike Rutherford. I really wish that maybe it could have been pushed a little bit further, but I do like the emphasis on Tony Banks in this album.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And yeah, I like the ambience throughout this track, and
Hmm.
build ups here and there. Like I'm sort of like building up and down. It's the
Yeah,
best
yeah.
part of liking prog, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, because I know this goes directly into the second track, if we're ready
Yeah,
to talk about that one.
yeah, absolutely.
Because yeah, Fly on the Windshield, and it depends on which version you're listening to too, because sometimes they break those into two songs and sometimes it's one, where it's Fly on the Windshield and Broadway Melody of 1974.
Yeah, when I listened to it, it all kind of just ran into each other.
Yeah, well, I think that's how you're supposed to listen to it. Like that's how I
I
listen
liked
to it.
that. Yeah,
Yeah, where it's really you're listening to the sides of the album rather than the tracks of the album.
mm,
But like what you were saying with like the build-ups, and I feel like these two tracks of Fly on the Windshield, like that is less of a build-up and more of like a punch in the face. Because it
yeah.
just
I can yeah.
that's where like the guitars and the bass really hit hard.
Yeah,
um, and it almost, I know that they've said that it was like boats on the Nile, because it was supposed to be kind of like this Egyptian kind of a feel to it.
yeah. I know. I did notice
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah, and I love that kind of like Egyptian feel to the music in that sense, especially when it's like really hitting hard on that beat.
Yeah, I've no, I picked out like some things that almost sounded like quite like early Genesis-y. Like
Hmm.
some of the sound, it kind of was like reminiscent of like nursery crime and
Yeah,
even like bits of like trespass and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah, definitely, especially with, oh boy, yeah, like the knife or some of the smaller parts, or I guess heavier parts on like the musical box, with like
Yeah,
really like almost pseudo metal. Like we're getting into like, I was feeling some of the acid rock stuff of like Black Sabbath a little bit in terms of like that
oh
really
yeah, definitely.
powerful 3 chord chug.
I thought that the drums like sounded almost like Bonham-esque at some points as
Hmm.
well. I
Yeah,
thought
yeah,
that this
yeah.
was like, well, this feels like a bit like a Led Zeppelin kind of a vibe here.
Yeah. Yeah. I can, now that you're putting that into that context, I can hear like a Kashmir, like that very like,
Yeah,
dun, dun, dun,
that's
dun.
exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And I guess that goes into the I think my favorite part of the whole album. It's the
Mhm.
short. It's a very short one. I love Broadway Melody of 1974.
Yeah.
I just absolutely love that. It's one that I
Hmm.
always re-listen to.
Yeah. I love how it's kind of both the come down as well as the really hard hitting part. Like whenever I listen to that when Steve Hackett does it live, because he did the whole like Genesis revival stuff,
Oh yeah,
um, it hits like ridiculously hard. And I love how the drummer is the one that's singing that part, because he actually has like a full time solo vocalist.
oh wow,
So yeah, and so it's the drummer that's singing a la like Phil Collins, and
hmm.
it hits so emotionally hard. I'm just like, so good.
Yeah. I just absolutely just love it. I wrote here that it's short but sweet. It's
Mhm.
just
It is.
absolutely amazing, and just,
Yeah.
I like the change in when he's like singing, when Peter Gabriel's singing, and then also like charismatically like talking like
Mhm.
towards like the end.
Yeah, and I love some of the word plays and like the actual lyrics, like the smell of bitter almond in the air, and
Yeah,
like it's so visual.
yeah, definitely. You just kind
Hmm.
of get a feel of it, definitely.
Yeah.
And the key changes, I love how, like throughout this album, there's so many different key changes.
Yeah,
Stuck
yeah,
into
it's
that. And that goes into the fourth track.
yeah, cocoon, cuckoo, or cuckoo, cocoon.
This messes with my head. That.
Yeah, yeah, I love this track. It's one of my favorites off of the album. I love how soothing it is and how it does feel like you're being wrapped up into that wool, like a really nice warm blanket.
Yeah,
It's so
definitely.
mellow and so warm, especially
Yeah.
for the track that's coming up.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I love the reverb guitar and the different vocal effects and just the flute playing as well. Absolutely amazing. It really complements the track.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, speaking of the vocals, there is very little vocals on this album that don't have some kind of like a weird effect on his voice. And I
Yeah,
didn't
I noticed
realize that until like years and years later, where I'm like, wait, there's like almost effects on all of his voice except for maybe one or two tracks.
Yeah, there was always some like kind of strange vocal effects that really worked with the tracks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just great lyrics.
Yeah.
And next track is probably like one of my favorites from re-listening
Yeah.
to the album, which is In the Cage. I think a lot of people will be familiar with this one.
Yeah.
Just I love this track so much.
Yeah, and I love, again, it's the journey. Like I think this one's one of the longer tracks off of this. I think either like this one and The Colony of Slipperman, I think, are the two
Yeah, they're the
plus
longest
10
ones.
tracks.
Yeah, I
No,
think
this
they're
one's only
around
like
that
8
mark.
minutes. Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
longer. It's like plus 6. And yeah, I love where it goes, and I love that keyboard solo near the midpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do love that. Yeah, I like the build up and the execution of the build up. It just worked so well, and they did it really well. And it's just I'm lost for words. The change of like tone throughout the track, because it's so long, they were able to kind of change tones like a couple of times. Like at some points it'd be like kind of calm, at some points it'd be like oh, and the switches and key changes and different keyboard sounds and settings as well really made it more interesting. And I actually pointed out there was some almost like Keith Emerson type style playing like sounds in that particular track. Like when I kind of sat, I was like, what does this sound like? Oh yeah, that's what it sounds like. So I've been listening to a lot of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, like
because Tony is using a lot of like classical piano and just like straight up keyboards, but that track is one of the few that actually has like a synth or a Moog or like a Mellotron on it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I could, now that you've pointed it out, I'm hearing that Emerson sound towards it.
Yeah, I had to point that out. Like it just sounded so like that, and I just thought that it had just such a big sound overall, the track. Like usually I say that mainly with like 3-piece bands and how they have big sounds, but I think that even though they were a 5-piece band at this point, it's still a really big sound for only 5 people.
Yeah.
And great conclusion for that.
Yeah, it's well, I love narratively how he's trapped in this cage, and he sees his brother out there, and it's that like pleading, like, do you not even recognize me? Do you want to do anything? And you can really feel that angst in Peter's vocal performance, like this desperation.
Yeah, I picked up on that actually, just that kind of like strained vocals that really worked. Like there's a lot of heart and soul in it.
Yeah.
And that goes into the next track, which is The Grand Parade of Lifeless Packaging. I didn't write too much about this one because this one's quite short, I think. But I did love the build up and the keyboards and all that kind of stuff. The vocal overlays as well.
Yeah.
Vocals in and out.
When I first heard this album, this was my favorite track off of the album. And I think it was just because it was so simple and it was just a consistent build. Like the last track from Trilogy for Emerson, Lake and Palmer, or Crime of the Century from Supertramp, or Starship Trooper from Yes, where it's just that same meter that's just repeating itself, getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, I really like that. I like that in all those tracks that you mentioned as well.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that kind of, we're gonna put something out, we're gonna bring it back a bit and back and back and back, and it just works so well. And then going into the next track, which is Back in NYC. Yeah, I like this one. I wrote the drum intro was very infectious. I really liked that, and it was like kind of reminded me back to like Indicate a little bit to like the intro in a way. Like it kind of reminded me of that like, a little bit.
I can see that. Yeah.
And you know, great keyboards, vocal effects again, and I liked that this was quite a heavily keyboards based track because I used to play piano, and I think a lot of people know that, and you know, I've been picking it back up again, and just like being able to pick out all these different keyboard effects and all the different types of keyboards, which I'm still learning about. It's always great to kind of look into it and hear all the different styles.
Yeah, and I love how these, like the next 3 tracks essentially bleed into one another, creating like a full piece. I love, there was a gentleman by the name of Kevin Gilbert that did a cover of this back in the 90s. And he holds off on the big punch until the second verse. And I love how he's able to really utilize that because it shows the Steve Hackett sound effect on his guitar.
Yeah.
Because I love that like wow, 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 that he uses on a lot of his solo stuff.
Yeah, I loved the guitar's tone and effects all the way through this album. I think they were very, very good. Definitely a different step from like their previous work. I mean, if you compare it to something like Selling England, it's just, it feels like just 2 different bands in a weird ways, because this is like this long kind of Pink Floyd The Wall-esque kind of concept album, and then you've got like Nursery Cryme, which is quite short, and Selling England, which are quite short tracks, but are just still as amazing.
Yeah, like it's really a progressive band in that like this is such a strange step forward from the previous albums that you're right, it does sound like a completely different band.
But I think that it's like not necessarily a bad thing. I definitely think it's a great transition in my opinion, because they went from like that kind of whimsical kind of early 70s prog sound to this like almost big grand concept album kind of band, and I really like that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I love how like this track and then Hairless Heart really shine the light on Steve Hackett and Michael Rutherford. Definitely. I feel like these are their real moments to shine on this album.
Yeah, definitely. When like the acoustic parts on this album, which is so amazing. I picked that out, and every acoustic track I pointed it out. It was like every single track was different, but it all just sounded amazing together, all in one big piece. And I really love Steve Hackett's playing. I'm a big fan of it. I guess that leads into the next track.
Hairless Heart still, I believe that's the title. I'm really bad at that. Hairless Heart. It's still like, this is top tier for me. Like I love the instrumental piece of this.
Definitely.
I love how like without being massive or like hitting a billion notes like a John Petrucci or whatnot, you're still able to evoke such big emotions.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. I mean, I'm a big Dream Theater fan as well.
Same here. I love them.
But I sometimes like, it's like simple but effective. You know, I probably wouldn't be able to play it personally, but it's definitely something that's, you know, it's not too challenging for me. It's not too challenging for someone to listen to. I think it's a beautiful track, and the entry of the drums, and I really liked the bass tone actually throughout this album. Picking up on, you know, bass players and all that kind of stuff. I really loved it throughout this album. I like how like sometimes it was like in the back, and then sometimes there'd be like a bit more in the front. Not so much like in your face, like a kind of Esquire-esque or Geddy Lee, but like just about enough to still be heard.
Yeah, it's enough to draw your attention to it, but not so much that your attention is drawn to it.
Yeah, I think it's the perfect balance.
Yeah, I still love that instrumental, and I love how it's the bridge track between Back in New York City and Counting Out Time.
Yeah, I liked that kind of that bridge. Yeah, I liked that. And then that leading into that track.
Yeah.
I'm not sure because I've not listened to this album maybe as many times, but it doesn't sound like Peter Gabriel on vocals.
Yeah, I think it is, but I think Phil is doing a lot more harmonizing, and I think he's coming to the forefront.
Yeah, I think because I put here Phil Collins on vocals question mark because I wasn't sure.
Yeah, because I know
like sounded it.
Yeah, I know Phil has done like the lead vocals on tracks previous to this. Like I think there were 2 on Nursery Crimes and More Fool Me on Selling England.
Yeah.
But I think this is still Peter. And the only reason why I say that is if you listen to Peter's first solo album, he has a number of moments that sound like this.
Okay, yeah.
Especially on tracks like Excuse Me and there's another one off of that first album that it sounds very quirky. It sounds very like tongue-in-cheek, very fun.
Yeah. I got that kind of vibe from this track as well.
Yeah. I'm still trying to figure out how it fits within the overall narrative of the story, because it's a very strange kind of like coming of age, but in a very comedic setting.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. It felt like a bit like out of place with the album, but it kind of worked at the same time with the rest of the album. I loved the like weird instrumentation and like harmonies and just everything. I think this album overall, actually, from a production standpoint, was very well produced.
Oh yeah, extremely. And like that's some of the like guitar works. Again, we're going back to the guitar work of Steve Hackett's with that like that very strange like vibrating guitar.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think just great production on everything, especially vocals and drums. I think that was like the main one for me that I picked up on.
Yeah, for sure.
And then that fades out and then comes back into Carpet Crawlers, which I point out as one of my favorites upon re-listen. Definitely a change in tone again.
Very much. It almost gives me whiplash of like this fun, definitely quirky, very happy and bouncy to like this very somber, very intimate, very personal track of like, and now we're back kind of an idea.
Yeah, it's like, well, we did this, but we're going to bring you back here now.
That's right. Yeah, we were over here and now let's go back over here.
I just thought this was a really good track. I liked the, as I said, change in atmosphere, the keyboards, key changes, and all the different like vocals coming in and out, and the reverb as well on the vocals, which was like comes later on as well. What I noticed, it adds to that kind of ambience and atmosphere of the album.
Yeah, and I mean, it really shows how much of a staying power when like Genesis still tours playing this track. So even though they've reached like massive popular acclaim, they can play this toe in toe with We Can't or I Can't Dance or Turn It On Again, like those very poppy tracks. Like this can stand toe to toe with those guys and still reach massive appeal.
That's interesting. I thought that they kind of stopped doing the kind of 70s stuff when they were touring like later on.
Yeah, like I was lucky enough to see them when they toured in 2007. And they played In the Cage, as well as this was their final encore track. So they actually ended their concert with Carpet Crawlers.
Well, that's cool, actually. Yeah. That's great. That's kind of cool how they still played some of the 70s stuff.
Yeah, they still always kind of like tipped their hat to their 70s stuff. Even if it was like a giant medley from the 90s that I was lucky enough not to see, because they would just like throw all their older tracks into a 20-minute medley. That I was like, okay, well, I guess we got that out of our way.
Yeah, I know my friend, her parents actually went to see Steve Hackett, I think just down, and me and my dad just didn't get a chance to get tickets or anything, but they came back and they said it was really good.
Yeah, he comes around like once every other year with a Genesis show, and it's all of the stuff from like the 70s. I think the last one he did was like Wind and Wuthering, as well as Spectral Mornings.
All right.
Or maybe it was Selling England. He's done so many that it's hard to keep track at this point.
Yeah.
But each time it's just very, very emotional.
Yeah, I as soon as this whole COVID thing's gone, I'd love to try and get tickets for that.
Yeah.
But digressing, going back to the album, just a great track.
Yeah,
carpet crawlers.
I love carpet
Great.
crawlers. Yeah. Yeah. And
But
I love how it's followed up with the Chamber of 32 Doors.
yeah, I was
Hmm.
just about to say that. I really like the guitar entry on that. That was really
Hmm.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I love how it continues that intimate aspect.
Yeah.
And I love how heartfelt it is. Like it really kind of, again, I don't know where it kind of fits in the overall narrative outside of this giant queue that the lead character's in, and just kind of raising everybody to being stuck in this queue.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I really liked this track. I liked the bass and the vocal parts. The
Mm-hmm.
bell as well. I like when bands will put in like a bell sound.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I like tubular bells a lot, so I guess that's where that
Yeah.
stems from.
Yeah.
And I actually pointed out that I really liked Peter Gabriel's vocals on this track in particular. I just thought they sounded really good. Probably just
Mm-hmm.
well produced, great production.
Yeah. Yeah, because I feel like at this track, he's starting to get more out of his comfort zone in terms of like the higher notes,
Yeah,
especially with, and I don't know if it's Peter Gabriel or if it's Phil helping him out, but there's that like really high sustained note that he hits.
yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just like, wow, that's like, it's a very vulnerable note as well.
Yeah, definitely. I picked up on that. Just the dynamics of the vocals. Like sometimes it'd be like in the lower keys, and then sometimes you just kind of
Hmm.
reach up. And I like that. Yeah, I like that. Vocalists will push themselves to kind of get to those higher notes without it sounding too strained and like
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Because he doesn't like, you know how some people will just go for the note and like put all their energy into it? This was a
yeah,
very hesitant, I'm going to try. So I'm going to like keep it back a little bit, but still reach as hard as I can for it.
yeah, definitely. But I definitely
Mhm.
think it worked alongside the album.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I also love how it ends the first album. Like, I think it's a
Yeah,
great first act finale. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
It definitely felt like almost like a theater experience. Like this
Hmm.
is the end of the first part. You get the
Yeah.
interval, and now you got to get to the second disc now.
Yeah. You can almost feel like the curtains coming down.
Yeah, definitely. I think this was definitely my favorite of the two discs. I guess
Mm-hmm.
because I connected with it more in a way. I thought that the second one was very much experimental,
Yeah.
definitely more experimental side of Genesis.
Yeah. And
I do not have a problem with
that's,
that, but
yeah, that's why like it took me a lot longer to appreciate and fall in love with that second part. Cause like the first part was definitely much more love at first sight, loving it from the get-go. And the second one was much more, I'm going to spend some time with it and slowly grow to appreciate and love it.
yeah, I think I've got to listen to it again. That
Hmm.
second side because the first one was like I love this, and then like the
Hmm.
second side was like I like this, but I think I need a bit more time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So should we transition right into Lily White Lilith?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Cause that one,
I liked the intro, the
I was going to
guitar.
say,
Yeah.
I love how it just starts off with a punch. Like,
Mm.
yeah, if we're going with like a theater kind of exhibit, this is like the punch of music to remind everybody to take their seats again.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And it's I've written down like this is like a different tone from like the previous tracks. It's almost like this is a different side now. Like this
Hmm.
is you watch the first part or listen to the first part, and now you're gonna have something that's different and
Yeah.
maybe a bit more interesting to the ears as well.
Hmm. It's almost like more rockin' as well. Like the last couple of tracks off the first side were very like slow, somber, and this one is like a punch. It's like a much more rockin' track.
Yeah, definitely. I really like that about Genesis. Like they'll have like some tracks that are ambient and acoustic, and then they'll
Hmm.
come back and they'll do something like like
Yeah.
very big and grand.
Hmm.
I just love that about bands that can do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I liked the harmonies on this track, and bass again. I pointed out on this one was very much
Hmm.
in my head at the time.
Yeah, and I love how the bass and the guitars really act together to create that like
Yeah,
part. Yeah.
I love that. I loved that those working together, just and the vocals on top of that as well.
Yeah, everybody's really syncing and creating such synergy at this point.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the next track was very interesting for me.
Oh yeah.
The first like half, which was like the weird kind of experimental, weird use of instruments, strange experimentation, almost King Crimson-esque when they're at their most experimental. I loved it personally because I'm kind of used to that kind of sound now of like what's gonna happen now.
Yeah. When I was a teenager, I loved this track, and this really helped spur my love of progressive rock in like holding on to the chaos until you get to a resolution towards it.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
it really made me appreciate all the chaos that was going on. Like this track and Saucer Full of Secrets from Pink Floyd.
Oh yeah.
And like the last two tracks from Alan Parsons' I, Robot, where it's just this sound and chaos. Because when you're listening to it, you're like, what is going on? But then you just have that through line of the bass that brings the order that I love.
And then, you know, it just kind of goes into this kind of melodic kind of side, and proggy, all that kind of stuff. And I just loved that transition. I loved that so much.
Yeah, and I know we haven't really talked about it, but if you can, try to find like a live performance of this track.
Okay.
Because when they play it live, I was lucky enough to see the Musical Box perform it. They had like the 3 screens, and Peter would come up behind the one screen and silhouette himself in this like really gnarly costume, and it's just this shadow silhouette, and it looks like he's tearing apart one of the screens.
Oh my god.
During it. And like I started freaking out. I'm like, what is going on?
I love watching the Genesis live shows. The older ones, they're just great.
It really puts into context the music that's going on. Because it really showcases this figure and the fear that Rael is feeling at this point of like not knowing what's happening next.
Yeah. I loved it. I mean, it took me a while to kind of think, do I like this or or not? No, I do like this. Yeah.
I love that question. It's like, do I like this? Am I forcing myself to like this? Oh no, I like this.
Yeah. I've got like friends who just find me so strange for liking Prog.
I would when I was a teenager, I was always the designated driver and I had access to a van. So I would constantly play this for my friends, and they're like, please, for the love of all that is holy, stop playing these musics.
Yeah, I mean, like my friends can't even get through like a Pink Floyd track, so let alone something like this.
Yeah, it was either this or like Merlin the Magician from Rick Wakeman.
Oh yeah. That
would just be fun. Anyway, I digress.
Going on to the track anyway.
Yeah, I was gonna say anyway. I love the explosion in this track.
Yeah, definitely. I like that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, where it starts off again, very keyboard led, and very traditional song. But then it just like explodes with this like drumming from Phil and the keyboards from Tony. It just, I love it. I'm just like,
Yeah, I picked up on this like dual. There was like a bit of like dual guitar at some point as well, and I'm my favorite band of all time is Iron Maiden, so I'm a big fan of the dual guitars.
The dual guitars, right.
And hearing that in a Genesis track, it just sounded really great. Yeah, and I picked that out as one of my favorite tracks as well.
Yeah, I would listen to anyway, like almost on repeat.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And then into the next one.
Yeah, here comes the supernatural. I can never pronounce this word because Steve Wilson put out a concert DVD with this name, and I always butchered it.
Yeah.
Is it Anethnistis?
I think so. I mean, when I first like kind of looked at it with first glance, I thought it said like something about an atheist or something.
Yeah, because it's all about like anesthetize, like to put yourself to sleep. right? So yeah, here comes the supernatural anesthetist. Anyway, this track.
This is the next one.
The next one. Yeah.
Just great drumming. I really picked out the great drumming on this track.
Yeah. I love the drumming. I love how it's almost a pseudo interlude as well, because it is a smaller track.
Yeah, definitely.
You know? Yeah. And I was trying to compile a bunch of like instrumental tracks way long ago. And for the life of me, I thought this was an instrumental track because there's only lyrics at the very, very beginning. And then the rest is just Steve Hackett on the guitar.
I loved that kind of more like solo-y sound as well. It just, I really love that alongside the keyboards as well.
Yeah, kind of a dual keyboard and guitar, kind of like a call and answer kind of an idea.
Yeah, I love that a lot. I wish I could hear bass tone a bit more. But it did feel a bit, I did notice a bit of a change in the bass guitar tone, like a very small one.
Yeah, because I think there's less use of like foot pedals on this one and just more of his like traditional guitar bass.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. I wrote down here that the exit was quite freaky. I said, freaky exit, yeah.
Yeah, because it kind of comes all at once, and because you're kind of in the groove for a while, like it's very hypnotic, and then that
yeah just kind of
it jolts you awake for sure.
And then into the next track. Is it Lamia?
The Lamia?
Yeah,
because I think the Lamia is a Greek mythical creature of like a woman with a snake's body, I think it is.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and it's all about them devouring and like almost making love to this character. It's like really weird.
Yeah,
there's a lot of weird points on this, and I love the music.
Yeah, definitely.
Like I think it's very haunting. It's very soothing. It's almost like a lullaby.
Yeah, I really liked the dynamics on the piano as well, with the lower end and the higher end frequencies, and then also like the loudness of it and the quietness and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And again, this is where if you can see it live, Peter is in like this weird, almost like tube cylinder thing that he'll then move, and it just kind of like spirals around him.
All right.
And it provides this really soothing kind of atmosphere, even though the story is a little bit on the grotesque side.
Yeah. I picked up that like the vocal, the lyrics were interesting.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, if we want interesting lyrics, the next song is it's a strange one. Yeah,
I picked up on that actually. I pointed out that it was like quite atmospheric to begin with, and then there was like some really good instrumentals and intervals and stuff like that. And like the vocal like build-ups were really good. The lyrics were very interesting.
Yeah. So are we going into the Colony of Slippermen?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, that was oh no, we skipped over the Silent Sorrows and Empty Boats, the 3-minute interlude.
Oh yes.
Oh boy. Yeah, and this is basically just, I think it's just Steve Hackett and Tony just kind of like it's very soft and very subtle.
Yeah, I thought it was like very effective for quite a laid back kind of track.
Yeah, and again, it provides a really good, because I believe it's this song that ends the first side of the second disc, if we listen to it on record.
Yeah.
So I like how it provides a little bit of a outro, especially after the big powerhouse that was Lamia.
Yeah.
Before we get into the cruncher that is the Colony of Slippermen.
Yep. Interesting, very interesting track. I liked how it was broken down into different parts as well, and the transition between each part was so smooth. Yeah,
and I love how it starts off very off kilter.
I wrote down it was like quite experimental at the beginning.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it's a guitar or if it's a keyboard or if it's both. just with the sound effects that's going on. Like it does sound like a guitar at points, but then other sounds will come in that I'm like, is that Tony doing that weird stuff?
Yeah, I picked out that the guitar like playing was quite like interesting, like a different approach to the guitar rather than your standard just playing with it. It was like it felt like very different, but again, not necessarily a bad thing. Very well done.
Yeah.
And the way that, like as I said before, they all kind of lead into each other. This whole like 8-minute track and all the different sections led in very well.
Yeah, and then of course we have another explosion within this one where it comes into the track proper.
Yeah.
And I had a vocal coach because I was like in choir a long time ago, and we would use rapati, which I believe is the sound that comes from this one. I don't know if they were using that one or whatever they were saying in Adam Hart Mother. It just had that kind of syllable word about it to kind of kick it all up. And then, yeah, it's like almost a mad dash to the midpoint of this track with everybody playing all at once.
Yeah, I picked that out as well. Like it was like you could hear everything, but it was just all like an explosion of sound.
Yeah. Everybody's running at the same time. As one of my old friends would say, it sounded like 3 people were playing a different song at the same time, and yet it still worked because it was all in tempo.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I could get behind that idea.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah, and I love the that keyboard solo near the midpoint. It's a weird one.
Yeah, I picked up on that as well. I thought it was like strange, but really, really good. Really just kind of, I thought throughout this album as well, it kind of showed Tony Banks' like full talent, because there was just so much going on in each track and so many different keyboard type playing going on. Yeah. And I just thought, man, this guy is crazy. He's a great player.
Like everybody talks about range in terms of like a vocal range, but I feel like the range in terms of like keyboard playing is really applicable here. Just even in this one track.
Yeah, there's so much going on.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, but I love it. And I love just kind of where the track goes in terms of like its peaks and valleys and ups and downs.
Yeah.
It's a real ride.
Yeah, definitely. It did feel like a ride for me as well. Again, going back to the whole kind of theatre kind of outlook on it, it just felt like I was watching something, but it's like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, it's like this journey that's like not quite coming to it, like almost coming to an end, but not quite yet. And
yeah, I feel like this is like the One Day More from Les Mis, where it's like all the actors on stage singing their own little bits. And it's like the track just before the big showstopper. Yeah,
definitely. And then I guess that goes into the next track.
Yeah, The Ravine, which is another, I feel like this one and Sorrow, The Silent Sorrows and Empty Boats are very similar in being very slow, subdued, almost like a palate cleanser before we get into the next track.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely very atmospheric, very ambient, almost like a breather in a way. It's like, right, just get ready for the next bit now.
yeah, get ready because the next one's pretty intense.
And I think the next track, the light dies down on Broadway. I loved that so much. That was one of my favorites.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the few tracks that Peter Gabriel didn't write the lyrics for.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I feel like this one, and there was one other one that he didn't write, or at least didn't write the entirety of the lyrics, because he wrote all the lyrics for everything else, but I feel like this is one of the few that he didn't. I could be wrong, so don't quote me on that, but I feel like I read that somewhere.
Well, even if he did or didn't, it was just a great track.
yeah, and I love how it almost like revises the first track a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I loved about it as well. It was almost like a callback to the beginning. It's like, you still paying attention?
yeah. It's like it reintroduces, and it's almost like an interpretation of it too, because it is different.
It's like a different variation kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like the same song from a different universe.
Yeah, definitely. I thought that it was like the first track, but less higher tempo and a lot more kind of
Yeah.
slower.
Yeah. It's like you've spent so much energy. Now you need to do the same thing. It's like, oh man, I don't have that kind of energy. What am I supposed to do? Okay, let's put some really fun sound effects going on. That will work.
Yeah, definitely. And I wrote down that it feels like the end of a film. Like it felt like I could hear
Mm.
this at the end of like a film of some sort.
Yeah. Yeah. Like seeing the credits roll and then watching like, yeah, I could definitely see that.
Yeah,
Mhm,
that
mhm.
was one of my, as I said, one of my favorite tracks as well.
Yeah.
And then into the next track, which is Riding the Screen.
Yeah.
I liked this one a lot as well. I'm saying that
Yeah.
for all of them, but I just really like I liked the whole album really.
It's yeah, I love how bombastic everything is on this one because it's almost a purely instrumental one. And
Yeah,
I love how like just insane it is. Like it's full throttle throughout the whole thing. Um, yeah, I love how big and grand the track is.
yeah.
Um, and it really does feel like you're riding the rapids, like you're caught in this riptide and you have no option but to let it take you away.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I pointed out as well that the minimal vocals almost added something to it. You know, it
Hmm.
added almost like another atmospheric kind of thing with
Yeah,
like a little chop of vocals, but then like letting them
yeah.
like instrumentals kind of show through as
Hmm.
well.
Yeah, and I love the very softness of like "Here I Go," and then the
Yeah,
song just explodes again, and it almost has like this. Okay, do I really want to do this? I don't know. Okay, here I go, and then, bam.
yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
And the drums on this track, I think just the drums throughout the album were just so great.
Yeah, yeah. I know Phil gets talked about like for all of his other works, but man, his drumming is still like
Honestly,
top notch.
I really think that he's weirdly underrated drummer because everyone kind of
Yeah,
knows him as like the front man of like 80s
yeah,
Genesis and you know
yeah.
his big old solo career and stuff like that.
Yeah,
But
and everybody's like, "Oh yeah, his work with Tarzan." It's like, yeah, it's all great, but like his drumming though,
it's the drumming on the early Genesis tracks and
drumming,
it's just great.
jeez, yeah. I mean, he was doing like crazy jazz stuff in like a rock arena. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, I just
Hmm.
I wish he carried on playing drums a bit more.
Yeah, yeah.
I would have loved to hear more of that kind of that feel because like you can really hear, especially in things like Nursery Crime and you know
Hmm.
with the more upbeat tracks, you can really feel him giving it his all. And my dad actually saw Genesis in 1972, and
Ooh,
when I think when the concert concluded, I think some of his
right.
drum kit collapsed
Yeah,
because he was just like coming at it.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, when I saw him in 2007, it ended, or at least near the end, it was just like him playing the drums, and the drums started with the stool. Like it started with
Yeah.
him drumming on the stool, and then it slowly worked its way to the rest of the drum kit.
Oh wow, that's interesting
It
actually.
was so wild. Yeah,
That's cool though.
yeah, yeah,
And I think we're on to the penultimate track of the album.
yeah, yeah.
It's been
There's
a
in.
crazy ride of an album.
It really has. Yeah, yeah. You've got "In the Rapids," second last track.
I really liked the guitar, reverberated guitar intro. I
Hmm.
just loved that so much.
Yeah, yeah, and I love how like after again, there's a lot of like transitional tracks off of this, like
Yeah,
from riding the scree to the final track. This is that much needed mellow bridge track.
yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
like you've come almost even you're nearly at the end.
Yeah. So it starts off very somber, very slow, and then it slowly built itself into the realization of what the ending is.
Mm,
Um, and I love that. I use this way too often, but like that explosion, right?
yeah, I mean it's the
Yeah.
best word to use, I guess. Yeah.
I guess, yeah.
I guess then that leads into the last track on the album.
Yeah, it.
And
Um,
I really liked this track, and it was like
mhm.
more upbeat than like some of the previous stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good note to end on, but it's a very strange, like I'm still trying to figure it out. Like
Yeah,
when we're when we went from In the Rapids, where it was essentially Rail realizing that John, his brother, is him the whole time.
mm.
And then it goes into it where it's just like this happy-go-lucky, hey, everything is great, everything's fine, hey, this
Yeah,
is
like
fun.
it was just weird. It was crazy.
Yeah, it's just like, wait, that's the end?
Yeah, I kind of thought it was like there's almost like a cliffhanger in a way.
Yeah, like there's leaving it open for interpretation, and then there's just like leaving it wide open as like a massive valley to be like, where are we? Okay, cool.
Yeah, definitely. It's almost like a okay.
Yeah, it's
That
like,
just
oh, okay.
happened.
that just happened. Yeah. Yeah.
But I wrote down that like at some point it almost sounded like a Nintendo soundtrack. Like there was like one point where I thought that sounds like kind of like Nintendo-y, like
Yeah,
a little
almost
bit.
like 8 or 16-bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I don't know how but I guess I was a big Nintendo fan when I was younger, but I just kind
Yeah.
of like picked up on that kind of stuff. I noticed that sometimes in projects like it sounds like video game music sometimes.
Yeah, and I think it might be those elevating notes from, and again, I don't know if it's the keyboards or if it's the guitar, that it does feel
Yeah.
like a character is leveling up or something.
Yeah, definitely. I loved it, and I thought it was a great finale anyway. So like this long journey that we've been on, just listening to the whole thing.
Yeah, and then it does feel kind of like if we're using the theater metaphor, everybody's coming out to take their curtain call and their big bow.
Yeah,
And everybody's like standing and clapping, like, "Hey, we did it! We made it to the end."
But we still don't know really what happened.
Who knows what happened? Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that's
that's
the
the album. Yeah.
Personally, I still think Nursery Rhyme's my favorite of the Genesis albums, the early Genesis stuff anyway.
Yeah.
I guess because that one has like a personal thing to me, and I've heard it more times. I preferred the first disc, but I think the second one might just grow on me eventually because I feel like it could. It's definitely a grower.
Yeah, for sure.
And more, I loved how experimental it was. I loved this experimental side of Genesis.
Yeah, and I mean, this was the swan song for Peter Gabriel in the band, so I think that this was the perfect way for him to kind of dip out of the band. And I do agree that the first disc is much more immediate, but I still love the experimentation and just like how far off the map they go with the second disc. It kind of does that same kind of experimentation that like Yes was doing with Tales of Topographic Oceans, where they were going where like music to this point, I don't want to say something crazy like they've never gone before or never will, but like they were really exploring the space to such a point where they were off the map.
Yeah, I definitely found that when I listened to Tales for the first time. I didn't get it at all the first time.
I did not like Tales the first couple of times. I liked Revealing Science of God and Rituals, and like that was it.
Yeah, I only liked I think a couple of things off the album, and I just wouldn't listen to the rest of it for like ages. And then when I got the Stephen Wilson remix, I sat myself down. I listened to the whole thing, and I thought, this is good. I like it.
Yeah, it's grown on me to the point where it's one of my favorites. Like it's in my top 5 favorite Yes albums. So
I don't know, but I think it probably would be in my top 5.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, it's just the experimentation of both of these albums, and both just happen to be concept double albums too.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out the concept of Tales of Topographic Oceans. I'm still trying to grasp it because when I was looking it up, it was like
I think John Anderson found a pamphlet for I can't remember if it was Buddhism or Hinduism or some kind of like how religion is more of a science and like all that kind of stuff, and like bringing together all those expressions. I think that's what it's all about.
Oh, that's great, actually.
Yeah, I remember reading about it like way back, where like each track is a different tenet that so many religions have. And it was all based on this pamphlet that he found in a hotel room.
Very, very interesting, actually.
Yeah. But anyway, that's The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway.
That's the end. Yeah,
that's the end. We made it to the end.
Great album. I hope that everyone who's watching this has enjoyed today's video. Thanks for coming on and doing this review. It was very fun.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was a great time.
And it's a great album. Great talking to someone who likes prog, because in my day-to-day life I don't meet many of those.
Yeah. That's literally why I started my channel, is to have an outlet, because I'm like, I need to tell people, but I'm starting to lose friends. So
yeah, I mean that's one of the reasons I started my channel as well. I wanted to talk to new people who liked the same things as me, because I didn't know anyone personally. So.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you get a chance, you should check out Kevin Gilbert, I believe it is.
Oh yeah, definitely.
His version of Back in New York City, because he wanted to do a whole concert of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, but then he passed away before it could happen. So
Oh right, okay.
yeah, but anyway, it's a fantastic cover of the song.
I'll definitely take a listen to that. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
All right. Well, I hope, as I said, I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see you all on Friday. Friday for my Friday video. So farewell. Thank you again for coming on the channel.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me.